I never thought my life would turn into a battlefield, but when betrayal came knocking, it didn't come alone. Corrupt agents, a crime syndicate, and a deal gone wrong. Now it's a fight for survival and someone isn't making it out alive. Staring down at the lifeless body, I struggled to wrap my head around everything that had led to this moment. Some people are just greedy. Others are just plain stupid. Not long ago, I had everything a man could ask for: success, family, and a thriving business that brought in serious money, thanks to a few lucrative government contracts. My wife adored me, my kids were happy and healthy, and life was good. Maybe too good. Because when you have it all, there's always some fool who thinks they can take it from you. That fool was Harold Hal Johnson. His body was sprawled on the floor, a crimson pool spreading beneath him. I swallowed hard, digging deep into the rage burning inside me, and with all the contempt I could muster, I spat on his worthless corpse. If anyone deserved to rot in the depths of hell, it was him. I've been in business for most of my adult life, navigating the highs and lows that come with it. In this world, you meet two kinds of people: those you build lifelong bonds with and those who are just waiting to stab you in the back. Oh, he belonged in the second category. My approach to life and business had always been simple: help those who need it, and when the time comes, you might find help yourself. That philosophy had served me well. When I started my little computer shop, I had backing from my in-laws and a few local businesses willing to take a chance on me. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a niche operation dealing in specialized computer components. At first, I stuck to the basics: fixing broken machines, writing code, designing high-performance parts for people who needed something more advanced than what you could buy off the shelf. But over time, my work caught the right eyes, and soon I was dealing with classified tech that came with bigger paychecks and bigger risks. Then one afternoon, everything started to change. I was eating lunch at my usual spot, a small diner downtown, when a stranger slid into the seat across from me like we were old friends. He didn't ask. He just started talking. Said he knew who I was and what I did. Told me he had a proposition, something that would make me piles of cash and keep it out of the government's reach. I barely looked up from my plate. As he droned on, his words started blending together into the background, like the muffled voices of adults in a Charlie Brown cartoon. The only thing I cared about at that moment was finishing my open-faced roast beef sandwich, which was damn good. I had no idea that conversation would lead me down the path to where I was standing now, looking at a dead man. And then there was Julie. She was the kind of woman who could read me like a book, always one step ahead of me. As I walked through the door that evening, she greeted me with a playful smirk. "Hey there," I murmured. She raised a teasing eyebrow. "Don't even think about it." I laughed, pulling her close. "What's the matter? Losing your touch, or do you just have a soft spot for your husband?" "Probably age," she teased. "But if you behave yourself, I might be in the mood for some quality time tonight. Just don't make me regret it." I grinned. "No special requests tonight, promise? But fair warning, I might be a little more enthusiastic than usual." She chuckled, shaking her head. "Let's save the enthusiasm for later. It should have been just another normal night. But fate had other plans. Because before the night was over, I'd find out that Hal Johnson wasn't just another crook trying to scam me. He was tied to something much bigger. And my wife, my business, my entire life, it was all about to get caught in the crossfire. And once the truth came out, there was no going back. Unraveling the truth. "I have a feeling you were the reason they targeted me," I said, my voice low but firm. Julie's expression darkened. "That's ridiculous. You have no proof that's why Hal approached you with that so-called deal." "The Hal Johnson I knew wouldn't have gotten mixed up with criminals," I countered. "But I looked into him, Julie. It's the same Hal Johnson you dated in college. Tell me, how many Hal Johnsons went to the same school at the same time and just happened to show up in my life now? If there's another, you'd better tell me." She hesitated, looking genuinely shaken. "Honey, I haven't spoken to Hal since college. We broke up back then, and yeah, he was upset about it, but that was his fault. I caught him cheating on me." I folded my arms. "You say he was a nice guy, but he cheated on you. Is that your definition of a nice guy?" I searched her face for any sign of dishonesty. "Tell me the truth, Julie. Are you holding anything back from me?" "No, I swear," she insisted, but there was a nervous edge to her voice. This was spiraling fast. I could feel it. Now the FBI was sniffing around, watching me and my company like a hawk. Like I said before, I run a legitimate business. But with federal agents involved, it was only a matter of time before they showed up at my office. I just hoped they'd follow the organized crime angle first before Hal Johnson noticed them and disappeared. Before heading home, I checked in with Monster, one of my most trusted guys. He was older now but sharp as ever. We had both been making an effort to stay healthy, eating better, working out more. Of course, every now and then, we'd indulge in a slice of Mario's pizza. I had helped set up their online ordering system and even developed an Android app for them at a steep discount. The original owner, Mario, had been one of my earliest supporters, helping me when I was just starting out. Now his son John had taken over and was expanding the business with a frozen pizza line for regional grocery stores. It had created jobs for a lot of local folks, something I always respected. But business aside, there was something much more pressing at hand. When I got home, I knew it was time for a serious conversation. Julie was already aware of some of the trouble brewing, but now I needed to make sure my daughters understood too. I gathered them in the living room, my tone calm but serious. "Girls," I started, glancing at each of them, "there's something important I need to tell you. Things at work are getting complicated and I won't lie to you, there's going to be some trouble." I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the difficult conversation ahead. A delicate balance. "I know you don't know all the details about what we do at the shop," I told them, my voice steady, "but you're old enough now to understand a little more. That being said, what I'm about to tell you stays in this family. No repeating it. Got it?" They nodded, eyes locked on me. "Our business works with the government on some very important projects, classified ones. That means what we do isn't something we talk about outside these walls." Julie was quiet, but I could tell she was still processing everything that had happened. I knew what was coming next, the dreaded "here it comes" moment. But instead of getting into another argument, I simply said the words I always told her. "I love you, Julie." She smiled softly. Sleep came quickly for her that night. I, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. I loved my wife like crazy, but something about her connection to Hal Johnson still gnawed at me. Until I had solid answers from my contacts at Stop Associates, I'd have to tread carefully. By morning I was up early making breakfast for everyone, eggs, fruit, pancakes. Just trying to create some sense of normalcy. As I set plates down, Julie looked at me with concern. "You be careful today," she said softly. "I will," I assured her. Mike, my right-hand guy, had been tracking my location through the installed GPS in my vehicle. He was already waiting for me when I arrived at our meeting spot. As soon as I stepped out of the car, he wasted no time filling me in. "The FBI's been keeping tabs on that crime family in Peoria," he said. "And guess what? Hal Johnson's right in the middle of it." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Let me guess, he's in trouble?" Mike nodded grimly. "More than that. They've pretty much told him if he doesn't seal this deal with you, his little pecker is going to end up in a mason jar before the month's over." I let out a low whistle. "They're still holding a grudge over that mess with the receptionist?" "Big time," Mike confirmed. "Cost them a fortune and they haven't forgotten." I mulled it over as we walked. Hal had backed himself into a corner, and I was just another piece in his desperate attempt to crawl out of it. That made him dangerous. But for now there were other priorities. That afternoon, Mary was feeling down, and the girls insisted on cheering her up. They wanted to go see her right away, and how could I say no? I loved those kids and they knew it. "I know you do," Julie said with a warm smile. "That's why you're special to all of us." On the drive over, I glanced at my guy. "So, did you manage to get a second date?" "Yeah," he admitted, then sighed. "But with everything going on around here, I have no idea when I'll have time for it." I smirked. "Don't worry about that. She starts working at the shop tomorrow." His eyes widened. "Seriously?" I nodded. "Yeah, but let's get one thing straight, you keep it professional during working hours. I don't need any HR nightmares over sexual harassment nonsense." He held up his hands. "Hey, I hear you loud and clear." We both chuckled, but my mind was still racing. Later that evening, as I sat alone, Julie's words from earlier replayed in my mind. "You are the man scale," she had told me. "No one else even comes close." I realized that after comparing every guy I met to you, and none of them measured up. She had said it with such sincerity that it caught me off guard. "And then," she had added, "I decided to call you, because I was only happy when I was with you. But you wouldn't pick up." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Even with everything going on, that one stuck with me. But I couldn't afford to let my guard down. Not yet. The breaking point. "I was too late," I murmured. "But you called again, didn't you?" I said, a small smile forming despite everything. Julie's eyes filled with something raw, desperation, regret, maybe both. "You bet I did," she whispered. "There was no way I was going to give you up without a fight. I wasn't about to hold back this time. I needed you to know that." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But my mind was elsewhere, replaying the events that had led me here. Hours earlier, I had been sitting at a quiet diner, absent-mindedly eating my meal, convinced that this whole trip was going to be a waste of time. Then, like clockwork, he walked in and sat down across from me. At first, disappointment hit me. Part of me had hoped he wouldn't show. But that feeling faded quickly, replaced by a morbid curiosity. I wanted to see what his next move was going to be. I kept my expression blank, offering nothing. This wasn't my game to play. It was his life on the line. After a tense silence, Hal finally spoke. "So, have you given any more thought to what we discussed the other day? It would be good for..." I cut him off with a cold stare, my patience thinning. "Let's not waste time, Hal." He hesitated, and in that moment I realized something. He was scared. And scared men make stupid choices. The conversation took a turn, one I had expected but still didn't enjoy. And then, outside the diner, things got messy. I don't even remember throwing the punch. One second I was staring at him. The next, my fist had connected with his face. The moment I stepped outside, the cool air hit me and I realized my hand was torn up and bleeding. I must have hit him harder than I thought. Strangely, I didn't even feel the pain. Inside my car, I took a deep breath and made the call. Just before 12:15 p.m., the line connected. "Report, please," I said. A voice on the other end responded immediately. "Are you all right, sir? We received a report from your surveillance of an altercation. Do you require assistance?" I exhaled. "No. Just give me the report on the internals." There was a pause, the kind that hinted at hesitation. "Very well, sir. The internal reviews are complete as promised, and no threats have been found." That was something, at least. But it didn't make me feel any better. By the time I got home, I had already decided. Julie stood in the kitchen, acting like everything was normal. Like the past few days hadn't been unraveling right before my eyes. I wasn't in the mood to play along. "I don't understand. What are you talking about?" she asked, feigning confusion. I clenched my jaw. "Stop pretending, Julie. You know exactly what I mean. Either you start talking or my next call is to a divorce attorney." Her face paled. "An attorney? For what?" "For our divorce," I said flatly. "That's what happens when a husband finds out his wife has been unfaithful." For a moment, time froze. Then, in a burst of emotion, she slapped me. "Art." I didn't react. I just stood there, the sting barely registering against the storm inside me. Julie's eyes welled up with tears, and suddenly she wasn't angry anymore, just broken. I could feel my own resolve cracking as I slumped into a chair, overwhelmed by a wave of grief that I hadn't let myself feel until now. "I thought you loved me," I whispered. "Why?" Her face twisted in pain. "You were going to get them, after he released them," she admitted, her voice barely above a breath. "Get who?" She swallowed hard. "Hal was blackmailing me, with those damn videos. Threatening to post them. To send them to our friends, our family. It would have ruined everything. Don't you see?" I stared at her, trying to process her words. "You really think your reputation is more important than the truth?" I asked. She didn't answer. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. A shattered trust. Julie's voice trembled. "I really thought you trusted me, after everything we've been through. After all these years, after all the love we've shared." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring into nothing, feeling myself unravel from the inside out. "What do we do here in our business, Julie?" I finally asked, my voice hollow. She didn't answer. Maybe she didn't know what to say. Maybe she didn't want to face the truth. It didn't matter anymore. Unless whoever was behind this had a small army, I had options. I pulled out my phone and dialed. "Mike," I said, my voice steady. "It's time to come in." "I'm on my way," he replied without hesitation. Julie's face twisted in confusion. "Dennis, what's going on?" I turned to her, my expression unreadable. "You and the girls are taking a little trip." Her brow furrowed. "A trip? Where? What? I don't understand." "You can't stay here," I said simply. Julie's breath hitched. "I can't leave you. I won't leave you. Please, Dennis, don't make me go. We need to talk." "You don't have a choice." Just then Mike walked in. His presence alone made the air in the room feel heavier. "Julie," I said, motioning toward him, "this is Mike. He'll be looking after you and the girls. You'll go with him. No arguments." Her face crumbled, but she didn't protest any further. Maybe she finally understood just how serious things had become. For over 50 years, Jack Murphy had been a straight shooter. I'd dealt with him before and I trusted him. When he offered to step in, I agreed, on one condition. If you're doing this, you notify your boss and the ethics officer of your agency. No backdoor deals. He nodded. That's a smart move. I'll take care of it. I ran my business clean, and I wasn't about to lose a government contract over some shady impropriety. But at that moment I needed a break. So I did something rare. I took one. I rented a car and followed the directions the negotiator had given me. George Washington National Forest was massive, and whatever was about to happen, I needed to be on my game. You know, if it's money you want, I can pay more, I told them. One of the men standing over me chuckled. Oh, I'm sure you could. But see, we have integrity to consider. If we don't honor our word, what kind of men would we be? Wonderful, honest kidnappers, I muttered sarcastically. He actually laughed at that. Now, relax. This will all be over soon. That's what I'm afraid of, I muttered. He chuckled again. The next few hours were spent tied to that damn chair, listening, waiting, trying to piece together whatever slivers of information I could. At some point, the pain in my head dulled, but the dizziness hadn't fully passed. I stretched my arms and legs trying to get the blood flowing again. That was enough to irritate my captor. He shoved me toward the door, making it clear that whatever civility they had was wearing thin. I knew I had to be ready. This could be my only chance. And just then, luck finally decided to show up. Running blind. I really needed to go. This outhouse was like any other, small, dark, and reeking of filth. God must have been watching over me though, because while I sat there on that splintered toilet seat, I found a loose board in the wall. Without wasting a second, I pried it open, creating just enough space to slip through. My body protested as I forced myself out, but there was no time to care. As soon as my feet hit the cold ground, I took off, running blindly into the woods. I didn't know where I was going, all I knew was that I had to go. Behind me, I could still hear the kidnappers crashing through the trees, shouting orders to one another. Strangely enough, their noise was a blessing. It helped me track where they weren't. As long as I could hear them, I knew which direction to avoid. But then something changed. The noise started fading. I was getting away. But away to where? A sharp pain shot through my skull and I struggled to keep my balance. My body was betraying me. My head was pounding, my vision blurred, and the cold was creeping in fast. My fingers were already going numb. I had been running on adrenaline, but now I was losing the battle to stay warm and upright. I pushed forward as best I could, stumbling through the underbrush, until I realized something that sent a fresh wave of fear through me. I couldn't hear them anymore. An unlikely shelter. The next thing I knew, I was sitting inside a dimly lit cabin, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug of something that smelled like fire and tasted even stronger. Drink? The man in front of me said. You look like you need it. I took a sip and immediately coughed. He wasn't kidding about it being strong. You want to tell me what the hell happened to you? He asked, crossing his arms. You show up in the middle of the night, pounding on my door, all busted up. I exhaled slowly. Thanks for the coffee, I said, my voice hoarse. My name's Dennis. I was kidnapped. I escaped after I knocked one of them cold with a club when they let me out to use the bathroom. The man raised an eyebrow. Kidnapped, huh? He eyed me up and down, taking in my disheveled appearance. I guess I could believe that. You sure as hell aren't dressed for deer hunting. Where am I, anyway? I asked. He smirked. Well, you're in the middle of nowhere. That figured. Something was wrong. I didn't remember falling asleep, but the next thing I knew, I was being jolted awake by a loud noise. Gunshots. I sat up instantly, my heart pounding. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. Where was Mike? I glanced around, searching for any sign of him. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. One of the rifles from the case was missing. Something was very, very wrong. I grabbed the .30-30 that was still in the case and moved toward the door, every muscle in my body tensed. I had no idea what I was walking into, but I wasn't about to sit here and wait to find out. The truth comes out. By the time I found him, Mike had a man pinned to the ground, a pistol pressed firmly against his head. Yeah, Mike said, his voice cold. He talked. The man beneath him squirmed, his face pale with fear. He spilled his guts about who hired him, Mike continued. Turns out he never even got paid, so he had no reason to stay loyal. I narrowed my eyes. Who was behind it? Mike exhaled sharply. A certain group of domestic players with deep ties to foreign corporations. They wanted you to play ball regarding the computer equipment. My blood ran cold. So that was it. This wasn't just about me. This was about something much bigger. And now I had the proof to back it up. The race against time. I sell to the government, okay? I didn't kill him, I said, my voice firm. Mike, however, had his own way of delivering justice. He made sure our so-called friend would be feeling the effects of his betrayal for a long time, some fine-tuning to his lower extremities as he put it. And as for me? Well, let's just say he'd be living with a bad shoulder for the rest of his life. Seemed like a fair trade. But none of that mattered now. Mike, we've got a bigger problem, I continued. The blackmailing, it was Julie. She's the one who released the records. Mike's expression darkened. Are you sure? I nodded grimly. Yeah. I confronted her. She didn't deny it. By now, the information was probably floating around for sale, and if it wasn't contained fast, it could be traced back to us. We've got 24 to 48 hours to handle this before I have to involve the feds, I told him. And you know they'll just screw everything up if they get their hands on it. I need you to do your magic. Either get the information back or make sure it's completely wiped before it can be used against us or the government. Mike exhaled sharply. I'm on it. A moment of peace. After everything that had happened, it was rare to find a quiet moment. But that night as I walked through the house, I saw something that made me pause. Curled up on the couch, under a single blanket, were two people who had been dancing around their feelings for far too long. They had finally found comfort in each other. I stood there for a moment, watching them sleep, a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. Knew it wouldn't take long. I cleared my throat loudly, just enough to wake them. It worked on the first try, go figure. The second they realized I was standing there, both scrambled to sit up, their faces turning bright red. Hearing the expected rush of apologies, I shook my head and held up a hand. Relax. You didn't do anything wrong. It was hard not to laugh at how flustered they were. The stakes are higher than ever. By the way, Mike said casually, how's the nose? I scowled. Nasty. He smirked. You're funny. You damn well know it's broken. I ignored his amusement and got to the point. What the hell are you talking about? The family wanting me dead? Mike's face turned serious. In a few minutes, everything I have on them will be in the hands of the FBI. And trust me, instead of just looking at RICO crimes, they're probably going to go for Patriot Act offenses. I let out a low whistle. So, we're talking next level heat. Yep, Mike confirmed. And do you really think they're just going to forget about you? Doubtful, I muttered. Mike leaned in slightly, his tone cold. I'll definitely enjoy looking at your dead body when all this is over and done. I shot him a glare, but his point was clear. This was far from over. The storm ahead. Things were moving fast and Julie knew it too. As of this morning, I put a real scare into your boyfriend, I told her. Her eyes flashed with frustration. He is not my boyfriend. How many times do I have to tell you that, Dennis? I don't have a boyfriend. Please believe me. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Slip of the tongue, I admitted. Your old boyfriend then. He made his choice. And honestly, I don't think he's going to survive the storm he brought down on us, especially not after the family gets their hands on him. Her expression softened, and her voice dropped to a whisper. I don't care about him. I only care about you and the girls. When can we come home? I wished I had an answer. A new realization. Lying awake that night, I kept replaying everything in my head, the kidnapping, the threats, the blackmail, the crime family that wanted me dead. And then something hit me like a punch to the gut. I had done everything I could to protect them. I had put them in hiding, kept them far away from the chaos, entrusted them to the best people I knew. But the truth was, I couldn't be there every minute of our lives. And that had to change. Julie and the girls needed to be able to protect themselves. I needed to make sure they could. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about survival. Taking control. I want you to teach me how to shoot a pistol, Julie said firmly. Mike hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know, Julie. Dennis might not be too happy about that. This isn't about Dennis, she shot back. This is about me protecting my family. He studied her for a moment, weighing her determination against his own reservations. Finally he sighed. All right. But if we do this, we do it right. Calling in the big guns. With everything spiraling out of control, I had no choice but to escalate things. The risk to my company, and the government, was too great to ignore. I needed action and I needed it now. I picked up the phone and made the call to the National Security Agency. With certain FBI agents already proven to be corrupt, I couldn't trust them to clean up their own mess. Instead, I needed the NSA to go after the family and track down any financial records that had already been sold on the black market. Of course, Mike and Susie were still my go-to for handling the more delicate matters. The call was quick and to the point. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. Within minutes, I had confirmation. A team was already being deployed. Their orders were clear: arrest if possible, eliminate if necessary. The corrupt FBI agents shielding the crime family? They were about to have a very bad day. The truth hits hard. Mike's intelligence team had finally put the last pieces together. The FBI agents monitoring the crime family? Mike said over the phone. They aren't just watching them, they're working for them. And they played a direct role in your blackmail. I clenched my jaw. So, they were never investigating the family. They were protecting them. Exactly. And if you hadn't acted when you did, if you hadn't sent Julie and the girls away with me, they all might have been killed. Julie overheard him and suddenly broke down, tears streaming down her face. Damn it, Dennis, she sobbed. This is all my fault. I've ruined everything, haven't I? I grabbed her by the shoulders, forcing her to meet my eyes. This is not your fault, I said firmly. Hal is the one to blame. And I swear to you he's going to pay dearly for it. She sniffled, nodding, but the guilt was still written all over her face. I didn't have time to convince her otherwise. I had work to do. Tying up loose ends. With the NSA now fully engaged, their priority was clear. Neutralize the family and the corrupt FBI agents, permanently if necessary. For now my family was safe. I pulled into the garage, exhaling deeply as I parked the car. Right now I needed two things: a cold beer and a moment of peace. Reaching for a Redbridge gluten-free beer, I twisted off the cap and took a slow sip. It actually tasted better than you'd think. Not something I could drink often, but tonight I needed it. I wanted a quiet evening. But I also didn't want my security detail sitting outside in a car like glorified parking attendants. I picked up my phone. Yes, sir, one of the guards answered. Why don't you guys come inside? I said. No reason for you to freeze your butts off out there. Copy that. We're on our way in. I leaned back in my chair, taking another sip. For the first time in what felt like days, I let myself breathe. But it didn't last. A new threat. The phone rang. Talk to me, I answered. Mike's voice was tense. We've got a situation. There was a small amount of blood found outside the SUV. It's his. I sat up straight. Whose? Our guys, he clarified. They were ambushed, taken to the hospital. Minor concussions, nothing serious. But get this, the doctors refused to release them, so they stole scrubs and walked out on their own. I shook my head in disbelief. They what? They're with me now, Mike confirmed. How do you want to proceed? I didn't even hesitate. Stay where you are. I'm on my way. I didn't know what kind of mess I was walking into. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over yet. Bringing hell to their doorstep. By the time I arrived, it was time to bring hell. While I was on the phone, Julie was outside, practicing with the Glock pistol Mike had given her. She was focused, determined, no hesitation in her stance. Then something went wrong. Mike, his signal's not coming through, Susie said, frowning at the screen. Mike's face darkened. That shouldn't be happening. This thing has never failed before, not even with walls of lead in the way. Could it have been damaged? Julie asked. Maybe if he was hit in the head too hard? Mike hesitated. That shouldn't matter. The tracker is in his sinus cavity, deep enough to be protected from impact. I exhaled sharply. We can't waste time. I'll call Monster. If anyone can fix this, it's him. Julie was already dialing. Within minutes, Monster and Susie arrived at the office, and I knew that between the two of them, if there was a way to get that signal back, they'd find it. The crime family's downfall. I had my doubts, the crime boss admitted, his voice heavy with regret. He sat across from me looking like a man who had lost everything. Because, well, he had. When Johnson came to me with this whole plan to force a deal with you, he continued, shaking his head, something told me not to go through with it. But for the first time since I became head of this family, I ignored that little voice. He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Look where it got me. Some of my best men, dead. The FBI agents I had on my payroll, either locked up or in body bags. I had to transfer every last cent of my stateside wealth to an offshore account just to stay afloat. And now, he let out a bitter chuckle. Now I have to live in Mexico, all because one idiot couldn't keep it in his pants. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. His mistakes had cost him everything. And now I was going to make sure he paid for it. The final execution. I was on my knees, hands bound behind my back, surrounded by bodies. The gunfire had been deafening. The men around me, dead. All except for Milo, the last one standing. He froze, waiting, unsure if he was next. 4 rifle barrels were pointed directly at him, fingers resting lightly on the triggers, deciding whether his fate was already sealed. You chose wrong. Mike put the last round in his head. Julie's breaking point. Outside, Julie heard the gunshots. The second the first shot rang out, she fought to get out of the SUV, but Monster and Susie held on to her, keeping her back. But she was stronger than they expected. With one last burst of strength, she broke free and bolted for the nearest door. Mike was still untying me when she ran inside. And then she saw him. Hal Johnson. Lying lifeless on the floor. Digging down deep, I spat on his worthless carcass. May he enjoy hell, because if anyone deserved to be there, it was him. Turning, I made my way out of the building. Julie was standing just outside, her body trembling, her breath uneven. The shock of killing her old boyfriend was finally beginning to set in. The second she saw me, she broke free of Mike and ran straight into my arms, sobbing into my chest. I held her tight. That was all I could do. I let her work it out, holding her as she clung to me. Looking over her shoulder, I saw Monster and Susie standing near the SUV, holding onto each other, tears in their eyes. It was finally over. The aftermath. Julie had nightmares about killing Hal for a while. But therapy helped. Mike helped too. He had been through similar things, and I know their talks made a difference. One night, she admitted something to me. I accept the nightmares of killing him, she whispered, her fingers laced with mine. Because they're better than the nightmare of visiting your grave. It took time. But in the end, she found peace. And so did I.